How far will F1 go with cultural appropriation for the brand? Does Lando Norris actually want to win the title? Welcome to Tinfoil Helmets, your occasional spicy hot take roundup with all the latest F1 rumors with the almost believable conspiracy theories to back them up. Everything here has been carefully researched for hours to make sure it is totally founded in logic, reasoning, and truth. Or not. Who knows? Well, that was a race.
It was a race. It was two races because we forgot it was a sprint weekend.
No, we didn't. It's just been so long since there's been a race. It's like, well, I guess we'll give them two this weekend.
True. I did forget it was a sprint weekend, and I was very disappointed when I found out it was.
And actually, this was maybe the first sprint weekend I can really remember where the sprint was just not a carbon copy of what the Grand Prix ended up being.
Yes, it was different, and everything was changed up, and it was all spicy.
Which I think is just a show of like hey, we're going to change around the weekend a little bit so you can get out of Parc Fermé between the sprint and the Grand Prix qualifying was absolutely the right move and actually makes the sprint like almost a race simulation for points, which is kind of more interesting.
And we are also far enough into the season that everybody's sorted out their budget caps and everybody knows how much they can crash. And so they've all been told that they can push harder and crash the car and not go over the budget cap. See, that's what it's all about.
Well, at least Mercedes drivers can.
Yeah. We'll get to that. Shall we see what we got right? So last time I made a bold, dynamic prediction that I should have placed half a bet on. Because I said Leclerc was win, and he did. But then I suggested that he was going to get disqualified for a flexi wing infringement, which doesn't appear to have happened yet, but there's still a chance. Tune in next week to find out if that's really happened. And I also said that because of this disqualification, that it would give the win to Lewis, who was going to be 3 seconds behind him. It was more than 3 seconds. Actually, it was a whole race behind him. So it wasn't going to work.
That was, that would be a hell of a penalty for Lewis to end up winning this race.
It's almost like getting a 60-place grid penalty. So yes, we have collected and committed and decided that I get half a point for those.
Right. So my predictions were Max takes the win, which, we should give ourselves half a point for that because he did take the win in the sprint.
He did? I forgot about that. Oh, we're going to have to do some math. That's going to be very complicated. I will update the very complicated algorithm and the data that is adjudicated by careful calculation to see where that gets us.
You mean fractions?
Yes, it's a complicated calculation. It took humans thousands of years, for us to find the ability to be able to do division.
Fantastic. Max, the Red Bull seems to be somewhat back to A form, which is good for them, I guess. I also predicted rain, which that was a beautiful blue sky sunny day. And an actual real safety car did happen because I said of a turn 1 incident, it was a turn 12 incident. So I at least had one digit right there. So that's definitely worth half a point.
Yeah. Where does that leave us in the Baseball Hall of Fame?
If we had a couple seasons like that together, we'd definitely be in there. But we're batting 289 right now. We're definitely a good player for any sort of team.
Okay, I'm like a B-list celebrity baseball signature. I'm not like getting the cereal sponsorship.
Well, the Astros are out of the playoffs and the Yankees made the World Series, so yeah, I'm not too happy about anything going on at baseball right now.
Okay, well, we will continue to strive to improve and make ourselves back and be excellent at the old bat and baseball thing. Because I know
I disagree. I think we're doing just great in our predictions because we want them spicy enough that they're plausible, but not tame enough that we just bat 1,000.
True. Shall we see if anything happened in the massive 4-week gap that was interminable and people were allowed to do things? I don't understand what F1 was thinking when they made this schedule up. They should have made it a shutdown thingy, but they didn't. Everybody could still do it.
Well, if we want to put on our tinfoil helmets, this was just, they knew Red Bull was going to suffer in the middle of the season, and they allowed this break to happen so that Red Bull could spend the time to figure out what went wrong, where their models led them astray, and so they could fix the damn car.
This is the problem with the scripted nature of Formula One, and that they really didn't do a good job of covering it up because they should have just made this more opaque to what had happened. But no, instead they gave them 4 weeks to fix it. But in those 4 weeks, boy, were Red Bull Racing making some decisions, taking some dynamism, and slow rolling out things that they probably could have done at the Thursday before Singapore, but they didn't.
Well, they didn't really slow roll Danny Rick losing his seat, because that was on Monday. And 5 minutes later, they welcomed Liam into the seat, which, man, I don't like how they did that.
I think that the absolute state of where they've ended up is fine. It's the way they did it. And
I agree.
They should have left him till the end of the season, or they should have done it at the summer break. But I think we can blame the Mexican Mafia for preventing that from happening.
Well, I don't mind. I even don't mind them when they drop. I mean, I want Danny Rick on the grid. I think he's a very fun personality and a good driver. And if we can have Nico Hulkenberg on the grid, then Danny Rick definitely deserves a seat. That being said, like, this wasn't like 1 week between races where we have to move quickly. Like, it was literally, they announced Danny Rick is out, and then like 20 minutes later, there was a social media post of Liam Lawson in. And like, for someone who's like as beloved across the grid as Daniel Ricciardo is, because people say a lot of things on the internet about Formula One drivers, and Danny definitely has gotten some criticism, but mostly towards his lack of results, not against him as a person at all. Everybody kind of tends to like Danny Rick as a person.
Yep. And
I think it was kind of sad for somebody who's probably driven his last Formula One race just to like not even be given a, hey, thanks Danny, and thanks for all of your time at Toro Rosso and then RB and then the Red Bull team. And like, you know, there could have been a nice career retrospective montage thing going on, especially dropping him before Austin, which is one of his favorite weekends on the calendar. Like, there were just some better ways to do it. Like, and I know Liam's probably already going to be within the team, but like, you could have given like a day or two to let, you know, Ricardo fandom breathe a little bit rather than just immediately moving on to the Liam Lawson era in a 3.5 week break.
That's why they should have done it on the Thursday before Singapore. Like, they should have announced it before the race, let the race do all of that, and then announced it on the Monday for Liam to be in the same. It would have been fine. But there is backstory here. This goes deeper. There is more conspiracy theories. Apparently, Helmut Marko, in an interview that Christian Horner gave immediately after this, that Helmut wanted to fire Danny as early as Spain this year. Dun, dun, dun. So Helmut continues his unbroken record of being a pain in the ass. I think that on a super kind of meta point, this is about the fact that Christian Horner, who had used his power to get Danny into the seat, has lost some of it. The chickens have come home to roost. And that this really is Helmut trying to re-exert his power over the team again. Yeah,
I mean, we've talked about this before, that I think in the death of Dietrich, that there is a power struggle at Red Bull, and we're still seeing that.
Yep. Should we move on to the next item, which is a shock announcement?
I love this one.
Alpine, a.k.a. Renault, have decided that they will no longer make any engines, which leaves, currently, as announced, as we all officially know, the Alpine team does not have an engine in their car. I'm not sure this will make the performance of the car any worse, but they do not currently have one.
Wasn't it more of they were going to not use Renault engines anymore, and necessarily Renault was not shutting down the F1 engine department?
The F1 engine department is being repurposed to build supercar and hypercar and other super duper investigations into batteries and blah de blah de blah, because you can't in France lay off people randomly like that. You actually have to give them a purpose, and this is probably for the best for those people, but I still think it's pretty sad that Renault is opting out of F1.
I just like that we could have ended up in a state, and maybe Welder could still end up in a state where, like, because they've been like, oh, we would want Mercedes engines, and it's like, well, yeah, everybody mostly seems to want Mercedes engines if you're going to be a customer team, but it seems very funny to me that Mercedes could say no, and then they have to end up with the engine who has the least amount of manufacturers represented on the grid, which would be Renault, who has 0. So they could, in theory, be back to Renault engines.
So I don't understand how this is going to work, because if they choose not to do it, and the Concord Agreement has them signed up for the 2026 regulations, I'm very curious how they're going to get out of this. I assume there is more to come in this space.
I mean, how does Andretti feel about buying an engine department?
Indeed, but they won't be buying an engine department because the engine department's making a supercar now.
That's fair.
So this
are we talking like a really fast road car, or like a Australian V8 supercar?
I believe they are making a road vehicle under the Alpine brand to be a supercar. As in, drive it around for very rich people.
You think Danny's going to end up in V8 supercars?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think he doesn't want to do that. Actually, if he's going to do it, it will be after a few years. It will not be like next year.
I would love for him to go like spend a season or two in NASCAR and like beat Kyle Larson, who everybody is like, oh man, he's better than Max Verstappen, and just be like, oh, this guy that like couldn't hang with Max Verstappen is just running laps around Kyle Larson. I think that would be hilarious. To be fair, I do think Kyle Larson's probably a pretty good driver, and I just hate those comparisons across the board.
I think, Danny, just going into NASCAR would just be worth it because I don't think very many F1 drivers have done that.
Juan Pablo Montoya.
He didn't. Did he do NASCAR competitively?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you only did IndyCar.
No, I think he's like the only driver to like win NASCAR, win Indy, and win in F1.
But he didn't get the triple crown, right?
No. Crazily enough. And now this has turned into me looking up Juan Pablo Montoya.
While Andrew continues to do research, it's very important. There are some other things that are interesting in this Renault thing. This is clearly a path to selling the team because now you don't have to, if you're going to buy the team, you don't have to buy the engine department, and the engine department is really expensive. So this is either the path for some very rich billionaire to lose $1 billion by buying a Formula One team, or it's an opportunity for Andretti to find their way in and do a bunch of weird things. But it's distinctly possible. And there is a rumor there are at least 2 other very rich people out there who would like to start an F1 team, and so maybe this is the opportunity. But yeah.
Ooh, Juan Pablo has a platinum racing license. That sounds cool. Anyway, let's see. In IndyCar, he had 5 wins. In Champ Car, which was also just kind of like IndyCar, he had 10 wins. In Formula One, he had 7 wins. In the NASCAR Cup Series, he had 2 wins. And in the NASCAR Infinity Series, he had 1 win. So the dude's won in all 3.
But he's never done WEC. Never won in WEC.
Sports car racing. Hold on. Let me just... Racing career. The career results of Juan Pablo Montoya has its own page.
Oh.
He won some stuff with IMSA.
That's close.
The Acura Sports Car Challenge in Mid-Ohio. He was 4th at Daytona. 24-hour Le Mans, he was 3rd in class 1 year.
Close. Can you get the Triple Crown for Le Mans by not being the outright winner but winning your class?
I don't know, but he did win the 24-hour of Le Mans in 2021 in the LMP2 Pro-Am car.
Oh, close. He's almost...
Oh, no, that was the World Championship results. He's done a lot. He's done a lot.
But not a world champion. So.
But I do think he won... he did win Monaco. He won Monaco in 2003. And he won Indy in 2015. So he has at least 2.
He could do it.
And then what is this? The 24-hour Le Mans 2001. He was on the winning team in the LMP2 Pro-Am car. So
it's a 2.75 of a crown.
He has more of the Triple Crown than Fernando Alonso does.
Spicy.
Because he at least has a class win.
Back to news between races. Speaking of teams making changes, Haas has signed up Toyota to upgrade their car and build them their first simulator. I don't know how it's 2024. They don't have a simulator. This is clearly not Toyota coming back to F1 in any way whatsoever. Nope, definitely not. Definitely Haas is not going to end up getting sold to Toyota in 2 years' time. Definitely not happening. But this might be good for Haas, who seem to have made a good step forward this weekend.
Yeah, apparently Haas don't have a simulator, and they've been running Ferrari's simulator.
It's very strange.
Yeah.
So,
what's a sim rate cost? A couple $100?
Well, exactly. Pop down your local Best Buy, pick up a steering wheel, get on F1. It's fun.
They got the Mercedes F1 car in iRacing. That's got to be worth something.
Exactly. It's just close enough. Just hire a hacker off the old dark web, fix it up. It'll be great. You won't have to. You just pirate it because it's Haas and they're being cheap. But back to drivers. There was a very interesting rumor that came out for one on the bubble driver. One great Sergio Perez is rumored that he is going to retire after the Mexico Grand Prix. But he came out and very, very staunchly and aggressive and conclusively posted a GIF. Actually, it was a video from The Wolf of Wall Street with Leonardo DiCaprio saying, "No way, no fucking way," which I'm pretty sure means that he's going to retire, especially when Helmut is quoted as saying it's Liam or Yuki in the car next to Max next year. Suspicious. and saying how they're good and their performance through the end of the year will determine who gets it. I think when we look at the race today, we'll find out that that's going to be Liam. And I think this is all about the fact that Horner, who's protected his boys, Danny and Checo, but it's no longer paying off. Back to the point that Dietrich's power vacuum, we have not seen the last of this. But the question is, though, what does Checo have over Horner that Horner let him stay in the car and make dumb mistakes and have cost the teams in millions of points in damage and points? Who knows?
Well, I think honestly, like in the post-Dietrich Red Bull world and in the cost cap world, Checo's kind of a pay driver. He brings in a lot of money into the Red Bull team that the Red Bull Beverages company does not have to give them.
I think that has a huge part of it. But there is a certain point where you've bent it and you've not got the points, that your sponsorship money is actually net still negative, because I can't believe he's covered his costs.
Sure, but I think if we're looking at a world where there is a power struggle at Red Bull and Christian Horner is trying to maintain some sort of power, not asking the higher-ups in Austria or Thailand for more money is beneficial.
For sure, but when you look at it overall, Horner needs to find a replacement for Checo, who can bring in, half the amount of sponsorship, but bend it less and perform better, would net be about the same. Speaking of candid information and revealing shocking truths about behind the scenes, in Podcast Corner, 2 former team principals gave 2 interviews on 2 separate podcasts that are definitely worth listening if you'd like to go behind the scenes. One was Ottmar Snaffhauser gave a candid interview on the High Performance podcast.
I got a lot of clips of that one on my social media. So if you're not getting that, tune your algorithm better. Man, there were some spicy bits in there.
Yes, he apparently paid the salaries of all the people at Force India twice because Vijay Mallya couldn't afford to pay it anymore. And he did this because his business partner that he does some other business thing was like, sure, you can have $2 million to pay everybody's salary on the team. And there was a risk, but I think this is the most interesting part of it, is he gave that money knowing that there was a chance that a creditor for the Force India team would show up and take all the money away and he'd never get it back, right? Because the idea here is that it would get paid out when something else had come through. So credit for Ottmar for doing that.
Yeah, no. Ottmar definitely came off very well in that interview. I also liked the... did you see the one about the signing of Oscar and how they like threw him under the bus? That was a good one too.
That was beautiful. The TLDR for people listening is when Oscar Piastri was signed, he wasn't really signed because they forgot to get the paperwork signed. And when they discovered this, the PR team at Alpine decided that they would blame Ottmar, despite the fact that all the paperwork was done before Ottmar had shown up, and they had told Ottmar that they had done the paperwork, and they threw him under the bus by putting out a press release without asking for him to say it, and put his picture on the press release saying it was him.
Yeah, and he went to like the press officer who he knew from like previous days. He's like, "Come on, this isn't true." And she's like, "Yeah, but I was told to do it." And like, there seemed to be a lot of that of, like, I think when he came into Renault/Alpine, like he was told you will have complete control over the team, and it turns out he didn't. Like Renault still ran a lot of they ran like HR and stuff like that, and
yes. HR, business, and marketing.
Which, given the Red Bull scandal, like you kind of maybe don't want the team principal to run HR, but it also seemed like. Given some of the stuff going on at Renault, they were maybe using HR in a bad way to performance manage some high salaried individuals who had been out in there for a while and knew their jobs very well out. And, you want those guys who know the minutia of the front wing to stay on your team and not go somewhere else. So it's like, yeah, I understand HR not wanting to be under the team principal, and that's probably good, but also using it to like make everybody fear for their jobs is not a way that you're going to win Formula One races.
No, it was really bad. I think it was also interesting that he was willing to throw Alpine under the bus very publicly, but he was not willing to do the same for Lawrence Stroll. He was much more like, Lawrence is his own man, blah, blah, makes certain choices. And I thought that's interesting because I think there's a difference between people you disagree with in the way you work, and you don't want to crap on people on the way up/down so that it doesn't do it the other way, and the fact that he feels absolutely and completely wrong by the Alpine team, which was just hilarious.
The Claire Williams one was also really good. I also got clips of that in my Instagram feed, and I think the saddest thing for me about that is I think they were 1 year away from being able to not sell the team.
Yes.
And that's the sad thing.
And this is going to sound slightly strange, but I think F1 is the worst for not having Claire Williams in a team principal position inside the F1. I think she would have been very valuable in... I think she gave this great example, is that she was able to come into a room where a bunch of old boys network, and because she was the odd one out, it gave her more insight into everything else, because nobody felt like she was part of the network, so they all like would talk to her in a way that revealed more information to her than they maybe would have done otherwise. I thought it was fascinating. And the stories about how they didn't pay any of their drivers, they were paying their drivers like only $100,000 a year, is kind of actually shocking. And I really hope Franco Colapinto is not getting paid peanuts.
Well, man, he needs to get paid, that's for certain. But we'll get on to that. I'm just sad that, like, because Williams is kind of like the last grade of like the privateer teams in a sense of like, oh, we're not Mercedes or anything like that. I'm Frank Williams, and I just decided I'm going to go Formula One racing one day, and like made it work for a bunch of years. And like, I don't think Claire was always the best as team principal. I think she didn't always make the best decisions, but they were kind of cash strapped in bad ways, I think, some points of times. But I think if they weren't able to sell the team, and maybe they still like bring James Vowles on board, like James and Claire as a combination, I think it would have been great. But sadly, they had to sell the Williams team, and
it was, by all accounts, I think it was it Rokit was the name, who just like decided not to pay them 1 year,
something like that. Yeah.
I do think it's a true statement that irrespective of if they'd made it one more year, they'd have been okay. I still don't think they'd have had the capital to be able to make the investments that they needed to do. They needed to bring in a third party. I think the difference might have been that they wouldn't have had to sell a controlling interest in the team.
Well, yeah, because that was the whole thing of like they were 1 year away. I forget when did they sell? 2000.
They sold in the middle of 2020.
Yeah, so they sold in the middle of 2020, and 2021 was like the year Drive to Survive really kicked off after all of everybody binging it and stuff over COVID and things like that. So it was just a case of like, because you see in 2021 how much like so many teams budgets exploded and partnerships come in. Like we've given McLaren a bunch of shit for, every different, oh, you want a spot on the car? Sure, we'll give you a spot on the car. Like everybody can have a spot on the car. We've given McLaren tons of crap about that. And so, Williams is not that far away. And, you look at some of the deals that like Alpine has gotten done and Haas has gotten done of like, oh, the cars on the back half of the grid are also getting sponsorship, because with the success of Drive to Survive, you see people coming in and being like, oh, I want to be part of Formula One. Sure. Like,
please write us a big check.
Yeah. Like what, Rob McElhenney and Ryan Reynolds and Travis Kelce are involved in Alpine now. Like, come on. Like,
imagine if they'd invested in Williams instead of Alpine.
Right. At least at the very least, the Williams name is still on the grid, which is nice.
Yes. But I think reading between the lines, I think that was part of the sale of the agreement, is that at least for some period they have to keep the name on the team.
Right. But it's just it's sad. Like I understand that things weren't going great for Williams, but it's so sad to think they were just like 1 year away from being able to pull it off.
Yeah, I think I'm not willing to subscribe being able to pull it off. I think they'd have been able to survive. But I think they've got so much investment now that there's a good chance. But I agree with your sentiment that Claire plus James Vowles could have been an interesting combination.
Because, I mean, you think of like if... who did they bring in? Paddy Lowe.
That was him. He was terrible.
Right, but if you think of like that would have paid off. Like, how much... In the world of we wanted Adrian Newey to go to Williams, if Claire Williams was still running Williams, do you think that would have changed things?
I don't know.
Hey, Adrian, we can undo the mistakes that my dad made.
Yeah, that would have been the sell. Because I think you, in an absolute terms, you'd have been like, I don't know. James Vowles seems like probably a better technical partner or whatever. But yeah, being able to say like, here's an apology for the mistakes that my father made. Interesting. Yes, I don't disagree with that. Shall we wrap up a little bit of this between ways drama with some Mercedes news?
Oh, sure.
This is very important news. This is possibly the most important part of the entire week. They found lizards in the Mercedes car park where they're building a new car park. They've rescued them, and they have built them a permanent home on site, and they have been named Ziggy, Wizzy, Lizzie, Lizard, Fizzy, Blizzard, and Lenny. I don't know why they just didn't go with more of a zzzz sound. This is very important because it shows that they care. Don't let Daniel Patrick find out, because otherwise there's going to be problems.
I mean, the lizard people are running Mercedes. That's all we need to know. I think it would have been better if they named them like Michael, Nico,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
George, Valtteri.
Yes. Toto, James, Ross. It'd have been perfect. And then last bit of Mercedes news. Lewis has been appointed to the advisory board of the 2025 Met Gala. Go Lewis. At the same time, on the back of the announcement that words, I will get this right. He also announced a vegan dog food with his dog, Roscoe. So Lewis is already branching out.
Yeah, you really shouldn't feed your dog vegan food.
They can be vegan. Cats can't be vegan. Cats cannot be vegan. They will die. Dogs can be vegan because they don't require the special thing that comes in it. Honest, I've looked this up multiple times because I feel like it's really bad, but dogs can be vegan. It's totally healthy for them.
I know you do not want to have your dog on a grain-free diet. They do need some grain.
Interesting. What happens? Big farts?
Enlarged heart problems. Not good things. I'm just going to go check on my chili. I'll be right back. Okay, bye. 1 second. Yes, this is an extra spicy episode of Tinfoil Helmets because I'm in the process of making chili, which has chilies in it, and they're spicy, and my fingers are still tingly.
All right, chill. Shall we head into our occasional segment, Does Blank Still Have a Job?
Yes, the one we do every week. That's so occasional.
Well, one day we're not going to do it. We're going to get close because at some point there's going to be no spiciness. Anyway.
Well, at some point, everybody's on the grid is going to be deserving of their job, and then we won't have to talk about it.
Indeed, and then F1 will be ruined. Why is Perez still in the Red Bull? I don't understand.
Money.
It's so confusing. Yeah, I think it's money, but his performance really wasn't for it.
Well, Stroll is still in the Aston Martin, so,
you
know.
Why?
He was terrible this weekend.
This weekend?
No, well, because it's the last data point we have, and dear God, he was terrible.
He was. Also, Alex Albon. He's not looking good against Mr. Colapinto.
Colapinto's looking really good. I wouldn't say Alex Albon's looking bad, per se, but just Colapinto's looking great.
Today, his performance was more like Logan Sargent than it was like Colapinto.
Colapinto got a point. Yeah, Albon, it's not good.
We will talk more about Mr. Colapinto, but I don't think I have anything else for why does Blank still have a job. Perez should be out, Stroll should be out, and Albon, I think he needs to buck up his ideas quickly. Should we move on to a new segment that we have developed today?
Yes, this is a very special segment of Crofty is cringe because I watch on ESPN, which means I get the Sky broadcast. And as someone who grew up in Texas, oh my gosh, I could not handle one more Texas reference because I wonder how like people from other countries view when Crofty is talking about their country or trying to like say things like Buenos Dias from the Mexican Grand Prix. Like, does it come across as cringy? Because, oh dear God, it was terrible.
Yes, it comes across as cringy, even when he does it in the United Kingdom. But yes, and he's pretty bad. Would you like to point out some of his most flawed examples today?
Well, some of this definitely does have some personal bias in it. For instance, there was a big football game in Austin last night between Georgia and Texas, and Georgia won. Yay.
Can you clarify which Texas? Because as my understanding is there are multiple Texas football teams for colleges.
Well, there's Texas, or there's University of Texas or Texas University.
Okay.
I would go Texas University. Yes, I would go Texas University because I went to Texas A&M. There's University of Houston. There's Texas Tech. There's Texas State. There's TCU. There's Baylor. Granted, none of those really have Texas in their name.
Okay, but in this one, this was the University of Texas.
This is University of, which is several years younger than Texas A&M University.
Okay, interesting. And you particularly were vexed by Crofty's...
Well, he was just talking about it's like, the biggest football game of the year. And it's like, it's week 6, man. It's a regular season game. Sure, it's a big matchup, but like, it's not the championship game. It's not even the conference championship game. Just an overrated team getting their ass kicked.
You mean like McLaren?
Yes, pretty much.
Okay, perfect. I also find it cringy. And I was disappointed the number of drivers who just leant all the way into Cowboys. And the only one that successfully pulled this off was Valtteri Bottas, who needs more time on the grid, and his better half, Tiffany Cromwell, who actually pulled off. They didn't go crazy. They just put reasonable, non-crazy cowboy hatty things on and just lived their life. It was great.
There was a pre-race segment with the Alpine drivers where they were attempting to shoot basketballs into a hoop in kind of football jerseys that said Spurs with like football sized numbers. And the Spurs are the San Antonio basketball team, so like 90 minutes down the road from Austin, because Austin has no professional sports teams. And on top of that, like the jerseys were football-esque, and watching two Frenchmen try to throw a basketball into a hoop was so cringe.
And one of them's tall. Surely it should be trivial for him.
No, but it's very clear that they are good at driving a car and not good at putting a ball through a hoop.
Well, actually, Esteban Ocon, it's not like he's good at threading the car between like small gaps in the track. He just hits the other driver.
We also had the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders, which seems like... I feel like if we can have the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders instead of grid girls, which they got rid of the grid girls,
yeah.
We should also have a flyover.
Did we not have a flyover?
No, because they banned flyovers like a couple of years ago.
No, they did. Look, they banned them for everywhere except, where was it? All of the Middle East, and I think the United Kingdom had one too.
Oh, we didn't get a flyover this week. That would
suspicious.
Yeah.
So
it's the American way.
It is the American way.
Because you know where there was a flyover? The Georgia-Texas game.
You know where there was a flyover before that? My bloody house 3 weeks ago, when like two ex-UW students decided it would be a good idea to fly around loudly all weekend. I thought we were being invaded until I worked out that it was a UW game.
The F-35s?
Yes.
Yeah, we make those. We're not being invaded. That's just the sound of freedom circling you overhead.
I know, I couldn't see it. I have a roof on my house, so I looked up and all I saw was my ceiling.
I will say the Austin Chamber of Commerce must be very happy with Crofty's performance, because, man, did he try to help and sell that city. Apparently, Austin is billing themselves as the live music capital of the country, which, because I guess they
steal that from Nashville.
I was going to say I would have thought that would have been Nashville, but I think with like Austin City Limits and 6th Street, they're going to claim they're the live music capital of the country. But I would have guessed Nashville.
Yeah, I would guess Nashville, but maybe times have changed.
Maybe it's one of those things that if you're really the live music capital of the country, you don't have to say you're the live music capital of the country. You know, we don't need to go showing off that we're the live music capital. And also, I think New Orleans should be included in the conversation, because you can go like hear some of the best jazz musicians you've ever heard on like a random Tuesday night at some bar in New Orleans, and it's going to be fantastic.
Exactly. So the answer here is Crofty is cringe, and F1 will go very far for the brand.
And Austin's trying too hard and needs to stop.
Yes, I agree. Shall we get into the sprinty part of the weekend?
I think it was the best part of the weekend.
I will not dispute that. Qualifying was fun. Somebody put some actual effort in. Somehow George managed to put it on the front row, which was shocking. Not that it stayed there.
Not for long.
Not for long. Lewis was apparently half a second ahead before Colapinto binned it, causing him to have to lift, which is kind of sad. Which, not to fast forward into the real qualifying, something happened between the two, and it's not entirely clear what. I thought the Ferrari team was very exciting with the fighting that they did in the first few laps of the actual sprinty racy thingy. It was great. They were going at it hammer and tongs, but I do question whether maybe they should have said, hang on a minute, let's go forward, get the other two people at the front, and then have a bit of a scrap. But instead they were like distracted, because apparently Carlos wants to prove that he should be on the grid, even though he is on the grid. It's very confusing.
I think this is just one of the cases, if you want your drivers to behave like that, then you give them long-term contracts, and you don't go, no, you're out of a job.
Yeah. Well, too late. They already fired him.
But to be fair, you know, if I had the opportunity to sign Lewis, I'd sign Lewis too. So maybe not after this weekend, but still.
Well, you would sign Lewis, but which of the other two drivers, which of your current paid drivers would you have fired? And I don't really know.
You know, it would be great to say Lewis is going to get a seat for next season. Whoever finishes higher in the championship will get the other seat.
Yes, this is exactly the way that it should have been done. Yes.
To be fair, though, that still currently is Charles.
Yes, but I still think they might.
But I love the idea of, like, you know, and then maybe you have Williams sitting out there being like, we will take whatever driver loses.
Yes. Just like the transfer market in, I think, soccer. Basically, you're going to do a whole bunch of different deals and the driver doesn't have a say in it. It's great. Love it. It's fantastic. Where are we here? George went back.
Well, just think of how like crazy silly season would be like if they did do something like that. And it's like, so you just have all these teams waiting until like Abu Dhabi to see like who there's going to sign. Because maybe you have like you have Williams that maybe has like a deal with Carlos, and you have like maybe Mercedes that had a deal with Charles, but then like no other seats can be filled until like the flag falls at Abu Dhabi or like whenever the season's decided. So like the flag drops and all of a sudden you just hear like all the driver news is like all these options get triggered and everybody's scrambling for a seat.
That would make F1 more exciting, but I don't know whether I'd love it. But I think we should try it.
Well, it's one of those things of like actually merit-based, contracts. It'd be great.
Pure meritocracy. George went backwards, and the prophecy was continued that Lewis went forward and George goes back until they meet. This is how it has been foretold. I'm mad at Lewis for not making that happen today because that would have been very interesting. Again, we'll get to that in a moment. I think this is probably because George just ate his tyres and then Lewis nursed his tyres. And so here we go. Haas's upgrades worked.
They did. Haas is looking good.
Yeah, even K-Mag was like in the thing mix until they did something weird in the race. But that's a different conversation. I will say the key takeaway from the qualifying part and what made it so exciting is people were trying. People actually put effort in and were like, even though it's 19 laps, we should just go for it. And it worked. And it was lovely. It was good. It was exciting. It was, 40 minutes of rounded circles? Love it. Great. We should do more of that.
I think this is a great... This weekend, I think, was a great example of how the rechanging of the sprint weekends made everything better.
Yes.
Of allowing the exit of Parc Fermé between the sprint race and the Grand Prix qualifying, because I think Ferrari was able to make several changes, and that Ferrari ended up being super fast.
I agree. Of note, Ferrari brought no upgrades this weekend. They were one of two teams, Williams being the other, who did not bring any upgrades this weekend. Which I think is fascinating given their performance on track. Shall we speak about the race, or did you have more to say about the sprinty thingy? What's it?
No, I thought it was good. Max kind of looked a little bit like Max of old, just piecing off into the distance, which was good for Max, bad for Lando. It was an interesting race. I did like the battle predictor of Lando and Max in 2 laps, and then like Lando just fell away. It's like, okay, I guess we're not battle predicting anymore. No, it was fine. It was good.
Okay.
I liked the sprint.
Yes.
I think somebody did something big on turn 1 of the sprint, didn't they?
I can't remember.
Oh yeah, Lando got all the way up to like second from fourth.
Yes, he pulled a future Leclerc.
Yeah,
but then didn't bottle it.
Yep. And then I will say one bad thing about this format is like nobody seemed energized for qualifying. Like Crofty and Brundle on the commentary were just like, and there's a fast lap, and Max goes to the top of the timing sheets. Oh, Perez is out.
What they should do, and I don't think the format would allow for this, like in the context of a promoter, is Friday should be FP1 and FP2. Saturday should be sprint qualifying and the sprint race. And then Sunday should be qualifying and the race. Because I think you move it to the day and everybody's energy level can return and they can be spicy and they get more practice time.
Yeah, and but it's just like normally, as they're going through towards the end of Q1, Crofty gets more animated about like, oh, and so-and-so's in the drop zone and he's not going to make it and he's not going to make it. And this was like, Lewis is out in Q1. That sucks for Lewis. Anyway, like it was just, I was trying to be enthused watching and it was just, no.
I agree.
No. Until George ruined qualifying for everybody.
We're moving in. We are going into the race because I need the edit point so I can put it in. So we're definitely.
No, that's still qualifying. George ruined qualifying.
No, but we're going into the race qualifying, not the sprint. We finished with the sprint.
Oh, I thought we were talking about race qualifying because we talked about how much of a snooze fest it was. That's race qualifying.
Okay, I missed that transition. I will have Dominic when you're trying to find this later. You need to go earlier.
Yeah. Are we going to leave the argument in the edit?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yes. So qualifying, yes, I agree.
And this is how the sausage is made, folks.
Sausages. It was Yonfest. But yes, George. Look at George. George got a phone call on the blower from Lando who said, "Let me have the pole." And George was like, "For you, I will bin it, and I will bin it really, really badly."
Do you think Lando had like a PowerPoint presentation ready to go because he knows he loves George's PowerPoints, or George loves?
Yeah, that's the only way you could get George to do something for you is with the PowerPoint presentation. Maybe an Excel spreadsheet.
It just hacks his steering wheel and gets it to pop up on his steering wheel.
Yes, exactly. It's got the little LCD screen, and every time he changes gear, it moves the slide forward.
Oh, and apparently Lewis's suspension was broken in FP1 in race qualification rate or session 1. Because they changed his suspension between the sprint and qualifying, and it turned out one of the bearings is broken, and that's why he couldn't do a good job in qualifying.
That was his claim. I'm a bit suspicious because they say it was the same part.
Same broken part.
Yeah, no, not the same. It was the same capability part, but it was a new replaced one.
Yeah, it was weird. But yeah, and Lando did a great first lap. Max did a banker lap. Max was looking super quick on the second lap, and then George binned it, and boo.
Yeah, that would have been a pole for Max if George hadn't binned it.
But we did get some spice out of the gate for the race.
We did. Max driving like he had nothing to lose, and Lando couldn't cope.
Nope, that one. Yeah, I mean that was like if Lando knows that Max is going to go up the inside in turn 1. Everybody knew Max was going to go up the inside in turn 1, and he left him so much space that it was the quintessential Austin run somebody way out wide, still make the corner, and be like, well, they couldn't make the track, they couldn't make the corner. Like that happens like every year at Austin. So also for like McLaren to be complaining about it, it's like that happens every year.
And that's what's great about this track. It lets everybody do something different and slightly weird on that first corner. It's brilliant.
I will say, Coda is actually like a fantastic track. Like
it is.
The uphill dive bomb into turn 1 is great. I love the sweepy S's in the end of the first sector. Then you get a nice big long straight for some nice DRS action. And then if you just can't quite pull off the DRS pass, like the next like 5, 6, 7, 8 corners all the way until about the last 2 right-handers are like multiple lines all the way through it. It's a very well done track.
And that's the key. It's the multiple lines, right? Because you don't know which one you're going to take, and if you somebody picks another one, you can pick a different one. Versus all these other tracks where there's one way through.
Right, and that's the thing is, it's like there were, like, it was great. We saw it in the sprint weekend. We saw it in the sprint race. We saw it in the actual race. Like, it was great.
Speaking of people slamming it down the inside, Charles did an amazing job.
Yeah, he saw what Lando did on Saturday and said, "I'm going to do that." Fourth is the best place to start.
Fourth into first, it was brilliant. And I love the fact that it was because Max and Lando weren't paying enough attention, and Charles was like, peace, mine.
Yep.
But you know who was missing from this?
George, because he started from the pit lane because he broke his car in qualifying.
Because he broke his car so bad that they couldn't put new bits on his car anymore. They had to go use Singapore bits. And Lewis, this is very important. Lewis offered George his bits of his car because Lewis was down in like 18th or whatever the hell it was.
Hey, but he was up to 12th by the end of the first lap.
We'll get to that in a minute. There's an important part here. But
12, Lewis's least favorite number.
Yes. He offered all of his pieces, and George said no. George refused to take those parts, and that's because he knows they're sabotaged. He knows that even if they claim to be the same spec, they are sabotaged. And he would rather have his Singapore unsabotaged parts than he would have brand new Austin sabotaged parts. That's what he knew, and that's why he refused to do it.
This is very The American Office season 3 with Andy Bernard of saboteur.
But it's true. How can we not prove it?
I believe you. I'm on your side. I like it.
And we saw what happened to Lewis, who, as you just said, did a Charles, stuck it up the inside, went from 17th to 12th.
Loved it.
In the first corner. It was beautiful. And he was going along. And then because his car was sabotaged, it did not respect him at turn 12. And he binned it and was out of the race at the end halfway through the second lap. And that was Lewis's weekend.
I'm really sad that happened because for once the Mercedes were at the back on the same strategy, so we weren't going to get this like alternate strategy, but we still put them on the same lap nonsense. And I wanted to see like if Lewis and George would still come together. That was like the one thing I was really missing.
I was so hopeful for that. I was looking forward to see what would happen, especially after that start from the pit lane. It just made me think this weekend could be interesting for Mercedes. But then Lewis binned it, and I'm disappointed.
Liam was looking good.
Oh, Liam was looking great. But before we do that, we do have to thank Lewis for breaking the safety car duck.
Yes and no.
Oh?
Yeah, we got a safety car. And, thankfully it wasn't a safety car right at like lap 25 where everybody pits all of a sudden. It was so early, like it didn't matter. There was no field spread. We're not pulling everybody back together. So it was good to see a safety car again. It was good to see a safety car restart again. But like...
You want it in the mid-40s?
Yeah, I want it like 15 to 20 laps to go.
Yeah.
With enough gap between the cars that somebody's going to dive into the pits and somebody's not going to dive into the pits.
Yeah.
But that's what I want.
But Lando's sabbatical, as I just saw on the internet, is over. So let's see what happens in Mexico, which was always good for somebody bidding it at turn 1. But
usually Checo.
Yeah. We'll get to that in a minute. Bit of a snooze in the middle, though. I will say the race was a bit sleepy. Not sleepy, but there was a bunch of stasis holding it. Kind of
this is my least favorite kind of Formula One race, where in the pre-show and in the build-up, it's like, oh, Pirelli say the fastest way to do this race is on a 2-stop strategy. We're expecting a 2-stop strategy. All the teams say we're going to make a 2-stop strategy work, and then it's a 1-stop.
Yeah.
Because it just ends up with everybody like kind of nursing their tire, shooting for a tire delta, which, don't get me wrong, is an important aspect of Formula One. But the more I watch, the more I guess you could say it's like a manufactured aspect of the race, but we already have that and you have to use 2 different compounds. I'd say go one further. You have to use all 3 compounds in a race.
I agree with that. I think if you've already broken the seal on mandating compounds, I think that's worth it. Do you think that it got turned from a 2 into a 1 because of the pit stop? Not the pit stop, the safety car.
Maybe.
Did Lewis do that? Was Lewis told to do this on purpose to give George a good chance?
It did help George out. I don't know. It was definitely like 2 or 3 laps of slower driving. Like maybe gave everybody a chance to scrub in the set of hards. Maybe that was, or the mediums. Maybe that was all it took. Yeah, I don't know. But I think it was just one of those things of, we've seen this a lot, especially like you look at Monza. It was supposed to be a 2-stop, and the winners were the ones that stretched the 1-stop. I think that's just kind of where we are in this generation of Formula One, because Jensen was complaining about it on the pre-show of like the tires cannot handle this generation of Formula One cars, because if you drive as hard as the Formula One car can drive, the tires will not keep up. So in a sense, we're kind of tire limited in that sense of, but this is what Formula One has decreed they want.
Yeah.
So
I do think that requiring a pit stop is a fundamental part of making it an exciting race. But I feel there's still more to be done. There's more that can be done here, and I'm not quite sure what it is. But after we woke up, not after we woke up, while we were snoozing, things happened. Turns out Liam, who had a 60-place grid penalty and basically started in Singapore, did an amazing job of driving the car, keeping it going, and managed to beat his teammate.
Which, real quick, I would like to once again say that if you are new to the podcast, Dominic and I are very much fans of, if you're going to have a 60-place grid penalty, we want you 60 places back on the grid. I want, in this case, starting out of like turn 15 or whatever it was, count back 60 places to where they are and ready, set, go from 60 places back. I want a grid box 60 places back.
I agree. I have another theory that would maybe work slightly less hilariously, but might work, which is you apply the grid penalty at the end of the race.
So he'd lose? Or yes, you do it by time?
No. He'd have 60 places that he'd drop, which means even if he won, he wouldn't win, which would be bad for championship situations. But outside of championship situations, I think it could be quite interesting, because you still got the like, if you've got a 5-place penalty, you still want to get all the way up to pole so that you damage limitation. It's only the 60 case that's really bad, but there's something in there. Or the other one is you have to accrue them. Like if you have a 60-place penalty, you qualify first, you go all the way back to 20, but then you get to the next race, you still qualify first, you have another go back to 20, and it takes you 3 races to get through it.
Oh, there you go. That like you can only serve as many. You can only serve as many grid penalties as there are spots available. So if you're like Lance Stroll and qualify 15th always, and you get 20 places of grid penalties, it's going to take you like 4 races to work it all out.
Yes, exactly.
I like that. I could go with that. The only other option I think would be like just some sort of time penalty of like, okay, it's a minute. And, we're not going to make you serve it during a pit stop or anything like that. We're just going to tack on a minute to your race time after everything.
Yes. 1 second per grid place penalty. So if it's a 5 place, you get 5 seconds. If it's a 20 place, it's 20 seconds.
I'd say 2 per spot. 2 per spot.
Okay, that makes sense. Otherwise,
because then a 5 place is a 10-second. That feels about right.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So after we'd woken up by Liam having a great drive and looking like a professional, clearly fighting for the Red Bull seat that he's supposed to be getting next year, and Yuki looking a bit suspect, then Lando and Max got into it, hammer and tongs. Woof!
That was some good racing by Max. And by Lando as well.
I think he was okay. I think he's missing the not adaptability, but like, you've got to look at what the other person is doing, and you really have to trick the person in front of you into thinking what you're going to do by doing it and then changing what you're going to do in a way that's very unpredictable. Lewis is extremely good at that. He watches people for like 4 laps, does the same thing for 4 laps, and is like, spicy, I did it a different way, and then gets past them. I think Lando needs to build that skill. That might have got Max, but Max was just placing that car. Ooh,
I don't think that would have gotten Max. I think Max is too good. Brundle made a comment of like, Lando needs to make Max uncomfortable, and it's like, I don't think Max doesn't get uncomfortable from situations like that. No. He's Max. It's going to be fine. Yeah, it was good. It was some good racing. And then we had to get the stewards involved.
Yes, we did, because somebody decided to make a bit of a lunge and kind of screwed it up and went off the track and kept the place.
So I took a peek at the Twitters because I refused to use the other name. And so many people were upset that Lando got a penalty when Max also left the track. So I think it is worth noting that the official steward's decision said that Max was ahead at the apex, and then Lando went off the track to overtake. And the textbook rule for penalty for that event is 10 seconds. But because Max also went off the track, they decided to only award him a 5-second penalty. So, I think that's fair. Of like, you're right. Max did something bad, but you did something worse. So we're not going to throw the whole book at you. We're going to throw some of the book at you.
I agree. It was a reasonable adjudication, and I'm not pro Max, but it was a thing. There was a whoopsie. They didn't hit each other. So.
A rare steward win?
Well, yes, but net they were still down because they made some crazy other suggestions earlier in the race, which is why the Max decision not to penalise him looks a bit suspicious, because they gave 3 other 5-second penalties for forcing a driver off the track. Russell got one, Yuki got one.
I think in that case, if Lando, I think, would have given the position back, I think there's a chance that Max gets the 5-second.
I think I would agree, because you're effectively saying that they applied the 5-second penalty to reduce the 10-second penalty to a 5-second penalty. Like, if you do magic math, that's kind of what it looks like.
Yeah, 10 seconds for Lando, 5 seconds for Max equals a 5-second for Lando. Yes. Yeah, I could see that. Yes. And if you look at it and I think if Lando doesn't do the overtake off the track and instead throws his hands up saying, he lunged me and pushed me off the track, Max gets a 5-second, I think, no doubt. In fact, I even texted you that, during the thing, it's like, oh, that's a Max penalty with everything else they've been doing until Lando completed the overtake off the track.
Yeah. You gotta learn how to play the stewards. So yes, but it was good. And apparently Max has been interviewed post-race by people like, blah, 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 blah. Do you have feelings about this? And, blah, 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 blah. And Max is like, stewards did the stewards thing. They made the decision. They applied the rules. The rules are clear.
I think especially with the pace Lando had, I think if he would have given the place back, I think you did open the door for Max to get a 5-second for pushing him off the track, because they were doing that. Because if I'm GP, I'm saying I'm seeing the whole weekend of hey, Max, don't make sure you don't push Lando off the track, because they're giving out 5-second penalties left and right out here. And, because that would be something, at least as a driver, I want to know doing the defense down that, because, you want to make sure you don't get that 5-second penalty. And, So I think if Lando gives the place back, but this goes on to some of the stuff we've talked about all season of, similar to Max in 2021, 2020 especially, of not being a mature world champion winning driver. You see mistakes like this. You see mistakes like this, and Lando making moves that he's not thinking long term about the championship. He's thinking very short term, and ends up in situations like this. We saw Lewis for years just say, "I don't need to win this corner. I need to win the season," and he gave it the spot. And Max didn't quite do that today, but that was definitely the same vibe as Max was racing like somebody who knows what it takes to win a world championship, and Lando wasn't.
I agree. You have a bullet point here, and I'm not sure I'm ready to talk about this out loud, but you can say it.
You want to highlight it?
When you want to, it's your point. You wanted to add it. It's I don't feel comfortable saying this because it's against my moral values.
I didn't write this line. You did.
Did I?
Yes.
Huh. Well, I'm going to have to say it then. Apparently, Russell did a good job somehow after binning his car. I feel very disappointed in having to say that out loud. You got even more spice to take later. in hindsight, he should have taken the pieces off Lewis's car, because then maybe it'd have been even faster. But he did drive a good. He went from the pit lane, didn't bin it with anybody, got a 5-second penalty, and ended up in 6th. So pretty good. Right where every Mercedes always is, 5th or 6th.
I'm curious what my even spicier take is, because I'm not sure what that is.
Shall we go into driver of the day / driver who couldn't wait for it to be over?
Absolutely.
My driver of the day is Franco Colapinto. He should be MF1. I know he's until the end of the year. He's got the core skills to be a great, at least midfield driver. I think there's actually something in there that could be really good. I think he's a little bit immature seeing the interviews he gives. It's hilarious. I do wonder, in actual fact, could he be the next kind of Ayrton Senna who like kind of comes from nowhere, kind of nobody really knows what he's been doing, and then kind of blows the barn doors off? He puts the car in exactly the right place in the track, just like Fernando does.
Oh, you know what we didn't talk about? Fernando's comments about Liam Lawson.
Oh, I kept forgetting to put that in that spicy list. Man, Fernando was really cranky about Liam's perfectly, I thought, reasonable driving.
Yeah, and
in the sprint race.
And it was something along the lines of like, he's driving for his career or something like that and needs to make better decisions or something like that. And it's like, I feel like passing Fernando Alonso is really good for your career.
Yes, exactly. In a reasonable way. I didn't think it was particularly aggressive. So,
yeah. Fernando seems very upset about his current competitiveness level of his car.
Yes, he's going to get a GP2 engine in 2026. It's going to be great. Driver who couldn't wait for it to be over for me is Lewis, so much so that he just decided to put it on lap 2 so he could go home early. You dispute that this is allowed, but
I dispute that Lewis is eligible for this award because he couldn't wait for his day to be over because his day never got started. So he shouldn't really be eligible for this. He made it to
lap 2. He started the race and made it to lap 2.
He didn't finish lap 2.
True, but he completed 1 lap.
I'm just saying, like, couldn't wait for their day to be over is like having a bad day in the car, going through the motions, Fernando had a day he couldn't wait to be over because he wasn't doing anything, he couldn't make any places, he was just getting passed. Lewis wanted his day to be over so quickly and made his day over so quickly by throwing into the gravel in turn 12.
So the criteria for being eligible to be driver who couldn't wait for it to be over is you have to have made it to a point where you'll be classified in the results. Doesn't mean you have to finish, but you have to be classified.
That is at least my personal take on this.
Okay. I will accept that going forward, but I am unwilling to reassess for this particular episode.
That's fair. But that's just like, it's, I guess, you could say a situation of like, if Lewis or unnamed driver, let's say Valtteri Bottas, played bumper cars with like 7 cars right at the start, and then had to go and didn't finish the race and like retired on lap 1, and then had to go do uncomfortable media pen interviews about, hey, how did you ruin 7 drivers' races? I will absolutely allow that because that's an uncomfortable day and they can't wait for it to be over. Okay. But like throwing yourself off the track in turn 12 and like not ruining anybody else's day, just your own, and going back to your motorhome, it's like you, because he's going to have to answer questions of like, hey, you ruined somebody else's race. You ruined Lando's championship. Like, that would be a bad day. This is just like he went and chilled in his motorhome. Maybe he got to meet, what's her name? Gabby somebody, the Olympic gold medalist. Yeah, gold medalist. Who she was like, yeah, I want to meet Lewis. So, I was, as soon as he was out on lap 2, I'm like, oh, maybe he'll get to meet the celebrity who wanted to meet him. That would be great.
I will concede that point and we will adjust the rules. And we will publish them. We will publish the rules for these for next season.
Right. Well, the big thing for me on this one is I think sometimes the driver of the day vote on F1 is just too much of a fan contest.
Oh yeah, it totally is.
Yeah, because like Charles did have I think Charles won driver of the day, and to be fair, Charles did have a really good day. I don't think Charles put a foot wrong, things like that. But for me, my driver of the day would have been, and it pains me to say this, George Russell, because the dude went from pit lane to he did the one stop perfectly from the hard to medium. He made it all the way up to 6th, getting past Checo Perez, who, if you ever want a good reason on why he should be fired, it's this one.
I understand your points and I accept them, but I need a moment because this is
on the show notes that we write up, I put George parentheses sobs because I can't believe I'm giving it to George. But if I'm looking at the grid and saying who had the most standout drive of the day, for me it's George Russell.
More so than Liam Lawson?
And he did it with a 5-second penalty.
He did do it with a 5-second penalty, which
I would say more so than Liam Lawson because Liam
didn't start from the pit lane.
Didn't start from the pit lane, and he didn't score as many points as Liam only finished ninth. Like,
yeah, he could if he'd finished in front of Perez, then maybe.
Yeah. So it was Liam started from the back, but then there was like enough shenanigans that he got up to ninth, and he did a good job getting up to ninth, but George had to get past even more people. The safety car probably definitely helped him, but helped everybody.
They converted his pit lane start into a last row start.
Sure. But you look at the drive that got Sergio Perez into the Red Bull. I mean, he was helped out by a safety car too. It happens.
Yeah. So what about your driver who couldn't wait for it to be over?
I think that would be Lando. It was a case of he needs points on Max.
Yep.
And he did not get points on Max in the sprint.
No.
He did what he does on lap 1 and lost the place to Max. And
we
lost
didn't
the
talk
place
about
to
the fact that he whiffed it.
Because we don't have to say it because it's what he does. Like, Singapore was the first time he's had pole and led after the first lap. Like, it's what he does. And as a result, it's if there was ever a race to watch your championship hopes disappear, it was this one.
Yeah, the whole weekend.
The whole weekend. Because, going into this race, he needed like 8.4, 8.7, I think, points per weekend on Max, which, if the McLaren's good, that's fine. Because Max needed to be second, but every race, but also needed a little bit of fastest lap point help, which I think at some point in time they're going to sacrifice Checo if that's what it's going to take, assuming Checo can get a fastest lap. But I think that's what Max needed to do coming into the weekend. That's what Lando needed Max to do coming into the weekend. And then you end up in a situation where not only is the Red Bull looking like it's back to being somewhat racy, or at least in this style of track, which, I would say Mexico's a similar style of track. Qatar can be a similar style of track. Because apparently what the McLaren doesn't do well is fast into hard, slow braking zones, which is a lot of what Austin is. That's Sector 3 of Abu Dhabi. That's part of other Abu Dhabi. That's discount Bahrain. That Brazil's a little flowy. I'm not gonna say Brazil, but definitely Mexico, because you have the stadium section and all, and you have the stadium section, and so it's, you look at a series of tracks that McLaren might struggle on or might not be as powerful on. Yeah. And Lando needs to be winning races. He doesn't need to be second. So he was behind Max through the entire sprint race. He was behind Max for lap 1, turn 2 onward. And it was also one of those things of you knew Max was going to do that move. Everybody knew Max was going to do that move. Except, and Lando didn't cover it off, or he didn't prepare for it well.
It's because he was trying to make a good start, let alone not... Because he's whiffed the start completely. There's a difference between losing it by turn 1 because you pick the wrong line, like today, versus whiffing the start because you forget how to start a car.
Right. And, I don't think Max is going to be as deliberate as Senna in Japan of we're just going to crash and end the championship right here. But to me, and I told my wife this, of looking at Max going into turn 1 was... I don't care if we have a crash. It's not bad for my championship if we come together. That's how I read that. Of sure, you want to take us, but he gave Lando the choice of, do we both want to be out of this race or not? It's up to you.
Smart move.
Because the other way to think about that is if Lando took them both out, it's going to be a grid penalty for Lando for the next race, which is also likely going to put him behind Max. So Lando has to watch Max essentially drive away from this weekend. And to be fair, the McLarens do a great job on their tires in the second phase of stints. And, they came back and Lando started coming back at Max. And it looks like that Red Bull might not be as great as we might have thought, but still not bad. It's definitely getting better. It's drivable. Yeah, Max looked like he'd turn the car again rather than, Zandvoort, where wherever he turned the wheel didn't work. Yeah. And then, there was... They did some great hard racing at the end. But Max proved why he's Max, putting the car exactly where he needs to be and not allowing Lando pass on a super wide racetrack. It's not Interlagos where that defense would have been a lot easier.
It was so beautiful.
It was great.
So beautiful.
And then Lando makes, I think, a rash decision, spurred on by the team, that I think can be a bit of sore winners. We are always right. and they didn't understand the fact of, like, they just said, no, we know we were ahead. They didn't even open the door to, well, maybe we weren't ahead and you should get that place back because there's still enough laps left and you were close enough that we think you can get him next time.
And it's funny when you look at the video, he wasn't ahead. Like, it was pretty clear. Like, who was the person sitting back in wherever it was making the decision and not looking at the feed and getting it wrong? Man, they should be in trouble on Monday morning.
And it's not like there's a cone that demarks, yes, this is where the apex is.
It wasn't that close. It's pretty damn obvious to the rest of us.
Right. So then to actually be able to pass Max on track, get a penalty that then puts Max barely back in front of you to the point of where you entered the race with a 52-point lead and leave the race with like a 57-point lead, or Max leaves with like a 57-point lead. Like, yeah, I think this was a weekend where, like, Lando watched the championship drive away from him. And to move on to our championship watch section, Lando now needs 11.4 points per weekend.
Not happening.
Like, that is essentially, Charles needs 15.8 points per weekend to win the driver's title. And that, to me, right now feels more likely than Lando winning the title.
Yeah, the way I think about it is, if you're going to get an 11.4 lead over Max, there's a good chance that Charles is equally capable of getting a 15.8 point lead over Max too. Because why is Max so far back? If Max is that far back, and assuming the Ferrari hasn't fallen apart, I think there's an equal chance that Charles will pull that off, right? Like, if it was like Lando needs to get 2 points per weekend and Charles needs to get 15 points, it's clearly not, like, it's much more in play and Charles isn't coming back from that. But this is close enough that it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, we said 5 or 6 races ago that if Max is going to win this championship, it's going to be because Mercedes shows up and Ferrari shows up and takes the big points away from the McLarens.
Here we are.
Because even if Max, or even if Lando doesn't get a penalty and Lando finishes ahead of Max, he's still in third, which is 15 points to Max getting 12 in fourth. Like, that means Lando only clawed back 1 point on Max this whole weekend, even if he doesn't get the 5-second penalty. And he's still now in a spot, because we're 5 race weekends to go. You're now talking about a 51 point advantage at that point in time. So you're talking 10 points a race weekend instead of 11. So it's still not a good spot to be in, even if he didn't get the penalty.
Spice takes some rumors?
Sure.
The only driver worthy of taking Bottas' seat at Sauber is the aforementioned Colapinto, and if anybody else takes it, it's a crime. I think Bottas should be in the seat for next year. I think he deserves one more year. But if they're going to go and swap it out, please don't give it to Guan Yu Zhou, who apparently is back in the lead again for getting that seat. Don't give it to one of those other F2 drivers. Like, Colapinto has shown he is worthy of this race.
Yeah, Colapinto is that epitome right now of, like, your F2 results do not equal your F1 potential.
Yes, exactly.
Which do we need a whole companion podcast of, is Formula 2 broken?
Oh, that can be that. We should do that post-season. When we do our performance driver reviews, we can do a short subsection on F2 drivers.
I'll have to educate myself about Formula 2 to be able to say that. But it does seem like winning Formula 2 does not make you a Formula 1 champion.
Correct. You have another take here for a spicy?
Oh, I do. That the only reason that Red Bull are still in the hunt for the driver's title is because of this massive break we just had. They had 4 weeks to sit down and go and trace back all the development, run some CFD, figure out where things are, and start moving in the proper direction. They had 3 weeks of not having to worry about making up ground on the McLarens or not losing ground on the McLarens to solve their problems and sort everything out. And then after Mexico and Interlagos, they got another 3 weeks to figure out anything else they need to do before the end of the season.
Max was quoted as saying that they threw away their entire upgrade plan after Monza. They had a plan in place prior to Monza, they did Monza, and they just threw the whole thing and went back to scratch again. And I think you're correct that this is what has made them come back into a chance rather than getting mugged.
And the good news there is it sounds like then they have enough of a budget cap space available to still do upgrades for the back half of the season. So the fact that they tossed it at Monza means okay, we you still have a chance. I think they still have a very good chance to at least capture the driver's title. I think Ferrari are looking the best right now for the constructors.
Yeah, I love it.
They are only 8 points behind Red Bull and 48 points now behind McLaren.
Very doable. Very doable. Predictions for Mexico?
Let's do it.
I think Max is going to win. I don't think that's particularly spicy. But I think Perez is going to get demoted to the VCARB after the race on Tuesday when all Red Bull people have left the country. or he announces his formal retirement on the Thursday before the race. Those are the only two situations.
My only problem with this prediction is generally we record on Sundays, which means we might have to like put this in lieu of like pending.
Yes, this will require us for our batting average to follow up in Brazil.
Yeah.
Yes.
Minus is Lando is going to lose more ground to Max while Charles gets closer.
Yeah,
So I think,
agree.
Yep. And I'm going to say Perez DNFs once again in Mexico.
You know, a Perez DNF after a formal announcement of a retirement would be.
We would just quit the podcast and start, or we would bring on DraftKings as our sponsor because our predictions are worth betting on.
Do we want to allow ourselves double points if we get both of those correct?
What, the DNF and
the DNF and the Thursday retirement?
I mean, absolutely. We make up the rules on this that if like we happen to get that, like if we get all four right, we should just quadruple our points because who cares?
Yeah.
We need a win bonus.
I'm
A fastest lap of predictions, if you will. Oh, we didn't even talk about that they're getting rid of the fastest lap point in 2025.
Oh, yeah. We didn't talk about Bibgate either.
Bibgate?
Bibgate. The little flappy thing with the button that was supposedly you press on the dashboard and it lifts your thing between qualifying and the race. But it turns out you have to take the whole front end of the car off, and apparently it's all a complete lie. So who knows?
That's true. We didn't even talk about that. About Red Bull's not cheating car. Or cheating,
yes,
cheating car?
Exactly. And apparently it came out today that McLaren admitted that they had been told by the FIA unless they fixed their wings, they were going to be sanctioned.
Oh, the rear or front or both?
All.
Fair enough. And now they're not as performant as they used to be.
Yeah, I don't know if that's that. I think that's just the driver.
Yeah, but they were both a little off the pace this weekend. Compared to where they've been, like...
Sure.
With the exception of Lando's magic lap in Q3... They were having a qualifying to forget all around.
Yeah. So, you've heard us whine on for another week about the clauses, classifications, and queries about Formula One. But remember, we are always waiting for your feedback. Write into feedback@tinfoilhelmets.com and let us know your conspiracies, feedbacks, and wants. Remember to tell your friends to like, listen, rate, and subscribe to the most suspicious podcast on Formula One in the Pacific Northwest.
Did you say suspicious or auspicious?
Suspicious.
Awesome.
Shall we get this started and smack that bitch up?
Hell yeah. She knows what she did.